am joined by two fantastic guests today looking ahead to the Barclays FAWSL season. We've got Fadumo, who is paving the way with sports journalism, Telegraph's online editor, and the wonderful Michelle Owen, who is also paving the way for women in sport with her broadcast at Sky Sports News. So guys, let's kick off. We'll go first with Arsenal. They won the season the year before last. This season, obviously, different circumstances, but they finished third. Fadumo, we'll come to you first. How do you think they might get on this season?
I think for Arsenal, it's been, disappointing by their standards, at least, to not have a trophy this season and to finish third. So, out of Champions League qualification, considering that last year they managed to get into it. So I do think that they'll reflect on this season and really realise that, the competition is very tough going into next season. I do think that they are. It's a bit of a sticky one though, considering that that they've only ever lost like a considerable game against, which was in Chelsea this season, which was a shock to everyone. So in that sense, I feel like that's where they might have to tighten the gap a little bit. But I think that's what Joe's done by bringing in defenders, and he's realised that's where the gap in the team is. But I do think they have actually got potential to maybe sit a second by the end of the season. Like, that's what I am thinking they could probably go ahead and do.
And Michelle, what are Arsenal's biggest strengths?
I think if you look at the experience they've got in that team they've had over the years, like personally, I still really rate players like Jordan Nobbs. You think of all the wealth of experience that she's had over the years, and Leah Williamson, she's been coming through. For me, the way she's played, she deserves to be getting England starts. Kim Little as a captain has been fantastic over the years, and Fadumo probably knows more about the depth of Arsenal than I do, to be fair. But when I sort of look down a team sheet or a squad of Arsenal players that were there last season, it's that experience they've got to call upon, perhaps compared to teams that were slightly lower down the league. I know when I was growing up, like, Arsenal were the women's team. And it's sort of, if you sort of step back and see where they are now, they want to be back up there. They want to be competing. So I think for me, the experience could be key. But then there's so much experience in the WSL now because it's become so established.
Definitely. Well, we're going to move on to another club. This is an interesting one. Birmingham. They've lost a lot of players, also signed some, the likes of Christy Murray. How do we think they'll get on this season, Fadumo?
I think Birmingham are really going to potentially struggle this season. I do think, they have brought in some players, but I think that, defensively they've been slacking massively, and that's cost them hugely in this league, and they are where they stand in the table, they're against the likes of Bristol City, Aston Villa, are probably going to be in the same kind of caliber of teams with them. So I do think they're going to struggle because there has been growth, but I don't think it's been like massive amounts of growth that's going to, give them the jumping start that they need in the WSL, because that's what cost Liverpool, their place in the WSL last season.
But also, am I right in saying, I'm pretty sure, didn't they just score 5 goals the whole of last season? So it's not just defensively they're going to look at. And defensively, they've got this young player, Lily Simkin, who she's like 16, and they're looking to youth. That's a lot of pressure on a young player's shoulders in this league, where it's more and more physical every week. You're playing against experienced players that have come over from the States as well as internationals from various countries. It's a lot of pressure to be putting on young players. I feel bad saying it, but I see problems right through the team. I'm struggling to look for sort of that standout area where they can sort of save themselves in games. But new manager, new ideas, we could be proved wrong.
Definitely, it'll be interesting. We'll keep an eye out and see how Birmingham get on. Now, I want to talk about a new team to the WSL, Aston Villa. How do you think they might fare?
They've got Enya Luca in as their sporting director. They're a team that have really, put their money where their mouth has gone, like, we're going to do something for the women's team. And, to bring in Anita Asante, which some people might say, she's past her prime, she's an older player, but I feel like the experience and the wisdom you bring to the changing room and to the atmosphere of the club is equally important, and it's something that Villa wouldn't have as a team that's newly promoted and none of their players having played WSL football before. So I think they've made some smart signings along the way. And with Enya Luku and her experience and as a director, and Gemma Davis is like just a lovely coach who's worked really hard with that team, and has taken them from a team that was losing 12-0 against United to being unbeaten for the championship, which I think is a massive achievement. So yeah, I'm secretly rooting for Villa to stay up.
I do think Anita Asante is a good signing, but I'm also aware she's had a couple of injuries lately. So it's one of those, isn't it? If she can stay fit, then she could be like we say, a really good signing. But injuries haven't been her friend recently. Chloe Arthur's an interesting one, isn't she? She signed from Birmingham. I watched her a bit when she was at Bristol City, and I thought she's really good midfielder. So I think she'll have a big impact. And I'm a Villa fan, so I hope they do really, really, really well. And I think for the integrity of the league, we can't have those big scores. The 12-0 and things. We need that not to happen. And credit to Villa that have put, the money in. They've invested. They've got Asante. They've got Chloe Arthur from Birmingham.
Do you think that Aston Villa will have enough quality for the WSL with the signings they've made and the players they've kept?
So I do think Aston Villa have got the potential to show up and do well. To stay in the WSL, you don't need a lot. The same way, if you lose a point at the WSL, it costs you a lot. It's kind of, the margins are very, very small. So, when you win a couple of games, you've kind of secured yourself for the rest of the season.
And Michelle, as a Villa fan, are you confident they can stay up and really progress?
Yeah, similarly, I think in amongst it, they do have some quality in there. They've made quite a few signings, so it's if they can get them to come together, which is a challenge for every squad. I could see them sort of maybe lower mid-table. For me, the WSL often gets split from, let's be honest, the top teams, and then, like we were saying, the teams around them. Just if you can take a point off a team here and there, it is enough, and that's not beyond them. I don't think. Of course, we haven't seen them play yet at this level, but I don't think it's beyond them.
Okay, moving on to Brighton. Fadumo, we'll start with you. Where do you feel they can challenge the WSL this season?
Brighton are a really interesting one because Hope Powell's got really high expectations for the team, and often says that the goal for them is to really become like a top-sided, or at least a top of half table team, and really challenge for like major titles. And then they are obviously still in the Women's FA Cup running at the moment, so at the quarterfinals. So I do think that they do have a lot of strength to them and a lot of depth in that sense. Again, my only thing with them is they haven't really bought massive players in that sense. Obviously, I know like a name isn't everything, and but it's like I just haven't really seen the connection with some of the buy-ins they've had, and I don't really understand where those connections are in that team in that sense. But no, I think I would be very surprised if Brighton got relegated this season. Very surprised.
Michelle, what would you say that Brighton's biggest strengths are?
Well, I was just a little bit surprised. They had the second worst goal difference last season, that they haven't done a bit more defensively. So, but it looks like, to my eye, it's in sort of the attack where they've strengthened. I think their biggest strength is probably Hope Powell and her experience of the game. She's going into her fourth season in charge. She's put the international experience behind her. So it's probably her experience, which, should have made those signings for a reason. We're not privy to what they are. Again, behind the scenes, I would just love to know the reasons for signings. And across football, we never get that information, do we? But it's hard to say. But I would say Hope Powell is probably one of their biggest strengths. They've got some good players in there. Maybe there isn't really that sort of star player that stands out like in the top clubs. But like the same, I'd be surprised if they went down as well.
Bristol, a lot of young players there, but a very experienced manager in Tanya Oxtoby. How do we think they might get on? Fadumo, we'll kick off with you.
I think with Bristol, it's obviously they narrowly missed out on relegation this season, and I think with Bristol is they find their form, but a lot later on. But initially last season, they went 9 games without a win. And like I said, the WSL that's not the place to go 9 games without a win. You can't catch up when you're that far behind. If you don't get good momentum from the get-go, it catches up with you really quickly.
Michelle, what are your thoughts on Bristol this season? Have they got enough quality in the squad?
It's a tough one. I just think there's so many. There's about 3, 4, maybe 5 teams, maybe 4, that are just going to be flirting with that relegation line the whole way through. And like we say, if any one of those teams gets points on the board early on, we've seen that you don't need that many points to stay up. So yeah, and actually they've had Lauren Dykes leave, Poppy Patterson has gone as well. So they had a few players depart this summer.
For me, it's interesting the signings they've made, the likes of Chloe Lagazzo, another Matilda in our league. She comes with experience of playing all across the country. She's played in so many different countries, and I think she's quite a leader as well. What new signings for you, Fadumo, do you think could be really beneficial to them?
I mean, I think it's quite impressive that they managed to get Gemma from Liverpool, and obviously, with Liverpool being relegated, that's quite good for her to still be able to stay up in the WSL. So I feel like that's where they've got some of their signings from, on the basis of the fact that Liverpool have been relegated. But again, I do think they are still missing defensively. That's going to be like their biggest cost to them. Like, the point difference between the top of the table and the bottom of the table is like 26 points. Is huge. So you need to be able to just literally just get maybe 1 point a game, or try your absolute best to at least defend and not get that many goals scored against, because that's what ultimately costs some of the teams their place in the league.
Well, we'll see how they get on. It should be a great season ahead. And up is Chelsea. Now, I'm sure we've all got a lot to say about Chelsea. They've made some fantastic signings. Not even sure where to start with them. I suppose Pernilla Harder, Michelle, a huge signing.
When we look at some of the signings that have come to the WSL this year, she's got to be one of the biggest. And I'm looking at the list of names now that they've signed. Some of the clubs they come from, like Bayern and Wolfsburg, and amongst others, and of course Pernilla Harder. I remember when they unveiled Sam Kerr, and then just a few months later, they get Pernilla Harder. It's amazing. From what I've seen and what people say about her, she's one of the most dangerous players in the world. I can't wait to see what she does for Chelsea. For me, Chelsea overall are, I don't know what Fadumo thinks, but for me, they're the team this season again.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chelsea are the team to beat. They'll be looking to defend their WSL, their Community Shield, their League Cup. Probably hoping to add a Champions League to that. I know Emma Hayes has been very passionate about the Champions League, and it's been her sole objective for a very long time. And I do think they are the team that can break through for that, because their last Champions League they were in against Lyon, I think that was the only time where I thought Lyon might actually get beaten, because it was very close at one point, and it was like, kind of touch and go. So I do think Chelsea are there. They're like toying with the line of like Champions League final, and it's like within reach at the moment.
Next up, Everton. And I'll tell you what, for me, Willie Kirk, fantastic manager, makes the right signings, really moulds players. He's built so many players in this league, if you look back to his days at Bristol. Michelle, Everton for you?
Well, I dealt with Willie a little bit at Bristol, because I'm local to it, and did a few interviews with him, and genuinely like a top guy. And it was sad to see him leave, and he's gone to Everton. I think he's made some big signings. Poppy Patterson, we mentioned, has gone from Bristol. Valerie Govan has gone there as well. She led the line at that brilliant French World Cup side. It was last summer, wasn't it? Yeah. And he's got some talent at his disposal. They need more consistency. They were trying to replace their top goal scorer. They've got Govan, so it'll be interesting to see how she settles in.
I think with Everton, I actually think they are a very strong mid-table team. Like, even the 7 losses they've had, they've only been against the top of the table. Yeah. It's been teams above them, so they've not actually lost against anyone below them in that sense. So they're a really well-established team in that sense. Obviously, losing out Chloe Kelly is going to be massive, leading goal scorer for them, and she's really carried that attack forward. And whether she'll get that similar experience at City is going to be a completely different thing. But Willie Kirk's going to have to look at how he can replace that. But he has really built a very strong foundation for this team. And I know they are, at the minute, toying with the idea of trying to break off into the top part of the table. But again, it's like the top half of the table is just running away with it. And it's like, is it going to be within reach for Everton? And I don't think this is the season maybe for it. But I do think they are quite close to that kind of space.
I think the WSL has become the best women's league in the world. But we need teams like Everton to make that next step to make it even more competitive.
I think they've honestly got a quality side. But again, we're going to have to move on. So next up, an interesting one that a lot of people speak about as being hard to come up against, Reading. Fadumo, Reading, what are you thinking?
I like Reading, mainly because I live very close to Reading, and it is like my local team. I do like Reading as a club. They are a very well experienced WSL team. I think they remind me of a really like a Sunday League team. Reading play like our Sunday League team. They play like really rough kind of type of football. But it's such good fun to actually watch, and I think that's most important. Is teams actually enjoy watching Reading play, and I can see where the challenge element comes into it. Obviously, I think previously Reading had become very dependent on Farrah Williams, and it was starting to show. They were losing games that they didn't need to be losing. They lost against West Ham for the semi-final of the FA Cup, not last season, the season before that, which is a game they definitely should not have lost. But I think Jess Fishlock is a great signing for them. I think Jess Fishlock, Farrah Williams, and hoping that Daniel Carter doesn't get injured, I really think that's going to strengthen Reading massively.
For me, Jess Fishlock, I know she's not exactly in her youth anymore, but I've watched her play for Wales so many times, and she has that star quality that when she walks out somewhere, she literally lights up the pitch. She is so skillful. Her technique is so sublime. She hasn't played here since 2012, so it's going to be interesting to see how she adapts to how the WSL is now, because 8 years later, everything is very, very different. But, she's been playing for Lyon, and she went over to Melbourne. So, she's had some great experience abroad and things, but Reading finished 5th last year. I'm not sure they can improve on that. But with someone like Jess Fishlock, she will have such an influence in the dressing room as well as on the pitch. I'm quite excited. I'm excited to see Jess Fishlock play back in the WSL. I know we've got all these big signings that we've been talking about, but for me, Jess Fishlock is one of the greats over the last sort of 10 to 15 years.
Right, moving on, Manchester City. This is a team that people are talking about, but at the same time, a lot of people seem to be saying that it's in Chelsea's hands. But how can we forget Manchester City with the signings they've made, the quality they have in the squad? Michelle, where do you think City, can build on their team this season? They narrowly lost out to the top spot.
I don't think we can forget about last season when we talk about Manchester City. Because when we stopped, they were top of the table, and they obviously finished second because of the way they worked it out, the points per game system calculations, and Chelsea were champions. Now, we'll never know if that is how it would have finished. But if I'm a Manchester City player this season, like that gets me fired up.
Fadumo, who will be the firepower for them?
I think Georgia Stanway is absolutely incredible for them. I think Chloe Kelly's got great potential. Lauren Hem's another one. And then obviously with their new signings. But I think with City, it's just the uncertainty factor. Nobody really knows much about Gareth Taylor. But I think as much as their team that well established in the WSL, they've won league multiple times. They've lost like a very long-serving manager, and we've seen the flip side of that in any other football, in men's football, that losing a manager and then coming back up from that sometimes does take a while, and you do go through the terms quite a bit. It's like whether City can afford for that to happen to them, and I think that's probably the only reason why I would say that Arsenal might be able to sneak up above them in this case.
It's a tough one to call where they finish this season. I would expect top 3 though.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Rose Lavelle and Sam Lewis in action. Huge. But we'll go to the other side of Manchester United. Fadumo, you know Manchester United well. How do you think they might get on?
I think Casey Stoney's done an incredible job with Manchester United. I think, you know what, there was this whole factor that, they're Manchester United, they're the biggest club in the world, like they have to do well, of course, but that, that doesn't guarantee they'll do well. They lost Alex Greenwood, who was their captain and a key part of that team. But I think a lot of the players actually showed up and did incredibly well. A lot of them are very young, but Casey Stoney's got a great network. I've got a great depth to those players. So, yeah, massive potential for Manchester United.
But they're going to want to be competing for the Champions League in a couple of years. Like that's where they want to get to. They want Champions League qualification. If they're going to take that next step to be in the Champions League, it's taking those next steps, consistency through the season, and having that bit more experience in the WSL this second season. Maybe that'll help with situations like that.
Yeah, I think they'll probably finish in that kind of fourth, fifth kind of space. But I do think, they were never. The WSL is not the championship where they were going unbeaten. A newly formed team going unbeaten in a year in a league is completely unheard of, and it's a completely different playing field. So they were going to have those games, and I think it's actually a good learning curve for them, if anything, because that's the reality of football, and you are going to lose, and you need to adjust to that. But I think Casey Stoney's got a really good team. All very young academy players. Some of them, a lot of them are homegrown players that she's really worked really hard to kind of build into the team. Lauren James is incredible. I think up and coming, like probably going to be one of the best footballers in the world in a couple of years' time. Casey Stoney's like really honing her talents at Manchester United, and I think and she's also got that legacy factor with her, obviously being a former England player, former Arsenal player. She's got that factor where she's played in the WSL, she knows what it's like. So has that got that relatability with the players?
Yeah, and you can't come and play in the WSL like you did in the Championship, and they'll have learned that last season.
Yeah, I mean they've got some amazing talent you touched on, and also like Jess Sigsworth and Kirsty Hansen who perform well. But moving on to another team that were newly promoted last season, Spurs. I think they surprised a lot of people. Do we think they can even do one better this season, Michelle?
Yeah, I think they did surprise a lot of people. They got a nice derby against West Ham to start with. Interesting sort of approach with the joint management. Finished 7th last season. It's one of them. Can they push on? I'm not too sure they can push on because of the likes that we've talked about before with Everton above them, Manchester United. These teams, even Reading, I still think are one step ahead.
Yeah, I think Spurs will, probably stay mid-table as they were last season. I think if they've got probably maybe something like the FA Cup or the League Cup, because it's probably got something where they can really work towards. And I think that's what a lot of clubs are starting to do now. Is like they, not eyeing so much the WSL as much, but they're putting their focus into other cups and realizing, we could get silverware elsewhere. And I think Tottenham will be one of those clubs.
Yeah, I love the joint management, and I'll tell you what, when I was at Spurs a long time ago, Kwan and Karen were both there at the time, and I've always loved their passion, and it's been amazing to see where they've taken the club. They've taken the club to the top from the bottom, realistically, and I think they've done an incredible job, and it's only right that they are rewarded for that. So you love to see it, really. But looking at West Ham, again, another team that have really strengthened. Fadumo, they have made...
That is such a... I really thought West Ham were just going to breeze through, this transfer window and not make that many signings. And I was like, this might not be a good idea, guys. But Rachel Daly is a great signing for them. I think the experience she brings, because West Ham are a very young team, very diverse in experience, and in terms of the playing, the clubs that all the players have come from. They've got a lot of young players who are quite new. They've got, and Hawa from France have recently joined. So I think they are a really good, team going forward. And, Matt has done really well with that team.
Michelle, talking of Matt Beard, how influential has he been in this league, and where do you think he could take West Ham?
It's fantastic what West Ham have done as well. They're becoming established now in the WSL. I would think they'll be okay this season. Ruby Grant caught my eye. She's come across from Arsenal. She's an England under-19 midfielder, and someone I've heard spoken about a fair bit. And you think if he's attracting those sort of players that want to work with him, that are in that key stage of their development as you're going into your 20s. As for a woman, I think you enter your prime a little bit earlier than men do. So she's going to be taking so much from him, putting her trust in him to be a regular starter, to try and catch the eye of the international selectors. To do that at West Ham kind of says where West Ham are at now. They should do well in the WSL, I would think. You know, again, not pushing for the top, but I would be surprised if, I would think sort of lower mid-table.